Okay, good morning, everybody. Shavua Tov. Shavua Tov. We are in chapter 18 of Shoftim, the book of Judges. I'll give you a 2-minute recap of where we're up to in the story. We started chapter 17 with the story of Micha. Micha's mother had some money stolen, significant sum of money. Micha admitted to the crime. Somebody's not muted. Whoever you are, please mute yourself. I'll try and mute you all again, and then I'll unmute Nachum and Nechama in a moment. Right. So Micha admitted to the crime, gave the money back. Between them, they made an ephod, some kind of idol thingy with a apron and some trafim, some little idols. And Micha set himself up a temple, installed his son as the priest, and he had this. We had this bizarre idea that they were serving Hashem by breaking the 10 Commandments and having avodah zarah. Along came a wandering Levi who was obviously searching for something and was taken in by Micha. Micha then appointed him as his priest. We'll see very shortly that there was no great loyalty to Micha by this Levi, but it was a good job for as he was concerned. He was paid a very nice wage of 100 pieces of silver and all his board and lodgings, and he became the priest there. We also spoke about this idea of Micha's house being a bit of a Chabad house, providing lodgings and food for wayfarers, for which Micha is given a significant reward, despite the fact that he was an idol worshipper. He is not listed amongst the people who lost their olam haba, their world to come. And the Gemara tells us that the reason for that was that he provided accommodation and food for wayfarers, and that tells us how important that is. We then sort of put that story on one side, and we began last week the story in the beginning of chapter 18 of the tribe of Dan. And again, we began the chapter with those important words, Vayamim hahem ein melech b'Yisrael. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everybody did whatever they wanted to do. There was no central authority. There was no courts to really have any recourse to. It was a free-for-all. There was anarchy. And as we know, I'm just going to share the screen with you now. Hang on a sec. Okay. Let me know if you can see the map, please. Yes, good. Thank you. So we know that the tribe of Dan was allocated this section of the land, more or less where we are. Joppa there is Jaffa. So this is Gush Dan. We had various thoughts last week as to why it was that Dan was not satisfied with this section of land. Some of us said that it was because they wanted to grow grapes, and the land here is not good for growing grapes. Actually, where they ended up here, which is now called Dan there, it was called Laish before. That is good grape growing territory. But one of the main reasons we thought that this was not a suitable place for them, or they didn't think it was a suitable place, was because of these people down here. The Pelishtim were very close by. And actually, I never actually noticed this until this morning, didn't point it out last week. You'll remember that there are 5 main towns of the Pelishtim: Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gat, and the 5th one is Ekron. And look where Ekron is. Ekron is actually in Gush Dan. So it seems very clear that Dan was unable to conquer his land. Not only was unable to conquer the land, one of the main Philistine towns was located in its territory. So perhaps we shouldn't be so harsh on Dan that they went looking for somewhere else. The commentators are harsh on Dan and say that they should have stayed and fought for their land, which was given to them by Moshe Rabbeinu and Yoshua. But I think you can see clearly why they wouldn't want to be there. They're surrounded by the Philistines. They're surrounded by the stronger tribe of Judah. Yes, Paul, I can't see you. Yeah, there you are, Paul. Yes.
Just looking at that map, just querying it. Ashkelon and Ashdod are in Philistia. Does that mean they were not part of Eretz Israel, or what? Because they don't seem to be allocated to any tribe.
No, yeah, you're right. It does seem that way, doesn't it? But I think this is the areas that were given out to Eretz Israel, to the tribes, and as you say, that area does not appear to be in biblical Israel. I don't know really. You would have thought that would be in biblical Israel because the borders. We talk about down into the border. We know certainly down in the bottom end here where Eilat is definitely not in biblical Israel. But that's a very good question, that Paul. I don't know. It certainly looks like it from that map. We'll have to do a bit of research. Anybody got any thoughts on that right now? Otherwise, I'll do a bit of research during the week and see what we come up with. That's a good question.
Johnny, wasn't all this land promised to the Jewish people by Hashem, and Moshe had told them go in? Why is there any hesitation?
Yeah, that's Paul's question, Nachum. That this map is the map of the tribal areas that were promised by Moshe to the Bnei Israel. As you can see on the other side of the Jordan River, you have Reuven, Gad, and half of Manasseh, which is what we read in yesterday's Sedra. These were all the areas right up to Sidon in the north that was the biblical land of Israel. What Paul's question is that this area here, which is called Philistia here, or the land of the Plishtim, does not appear to have been given to any tribe. So the question of Paul's question, which is a good question, was that not part of the land that was allocated to Israel? Because if it was, it should have been allocated to a particular tribe, and it shouldn't say Philistia there. It should say whatever tribe it was that was given it. And I don't know the answer to that. We need to go back into Chumash. Maybe David Marks, are you able to help us here with the division of the land in Chumash?
Yeah, if you look in the second of yesterday's Parshas Masay, and you've got there in chapter 34, the borders are the future borders of Eretz Israel, and the southern border is referred to as Nachal Mitzrayim. And I've got a map in front of me here actually. Nachal Mitzrayim is today where the border is between Israel and Egypt on the Mediterranean Sea, and Gaza here is definitely within that border.
Okay, so that's interesting because I wonder why on this map then. Does it say, David, where are we looking? Chapter 34?
Yeah, chapter 34. The southern border is...
What pasuk?
Well, it starts from pasuk 1.
Oh yes, there's a map here in the Steinsaltz. Let me see if I can show you this. Can you see that on my screen there? This is in the Steinsaltz Chumash, and you can see that the border there, the southern border, is very, very clearly south of the Gaza Strip. So that's very interesting indeed.
Jonathan,
Yes.
I've got you in my book, besides the Canaanite regions included within the tribal territories, we find the Bible the term the land that yet remains. Joshua 13:1-6 and Judges 3. This term included Philistia in the south, the Phoenician Sidonian coast up to Byblos, Lebanon and Aphek on the Amorite border and the valley of Lebanon.
Okay. So what's interesting there, thank you, Charlotte. What's interesting there is it appears that these were lands that were in the biblical land of Israel, but up until this time, well, we know that up until this time it hadn't been conquered. That's why Dan's going off somewhere else. But what's interesting is that this map, I mean, maybe the question, Paul, is not really the question on the Torah, it's really a question on this map as to why on this map, the only area of the biblical land of Israel which is not allocated appears to be the land of Philistia. And perhaps that's because that was the strongest area which we never conquered at that time. Could be.
Why are we not able to conquer someplace when Hashem told us, come into this land and I'll support you. You're going to win wherever you go.
Okay, the answer to that question, Nahum, is very clearly expressed in what we're learning now. Because the reason that we weren't able to conquer it is because we didn't behave ourselves. Look what we're doing. We're making avodah zarah. We're making temples here. We're making people who are not Kohanim into Kohanim. We've got a rival temple to the Mishkan, which is in Shiloh, which is just next door here. And we're not behaving. So when we don't behave, we don't get Hashem's support. It's quite simple. So, okay, thank you for that. That was very interesting. It seems that land is, yes, David.
Okay, similarly, when you look at chapter 34 in Bamidbar, the northern border of Eretz Israel goes way into Lebanon, up to a place called Hamat. And again, they never conquered, they never got to inhabit the furthest northern lands. However, going back to Dan, have a look first of all in Sefer Yehoshua, which I know you learned before I joined you, chapter 19, verses 40 to 48.
Yeah.
Which looks at the territory of Dan, and what's particularly interesting is Pasuk 47, which is obviously written after the death of Yehoshua, which refers to the incidents that are going on in our chapter.
Yeah, yeah.
And Rashi and Radak there suggest that the territory that Dan finally conquers, which we'll deal with later in our chapter, this was prophesied to them by Moshe Rabbeinu. That is referred to Dan Guraye Yizanek min Habashan. Habashan is the area in the Golan which Dan eventually inherits. So I agree with you that they were originally given this land. It wasn't sufficient for them because of the Pelishtim, and they had authority from the time of Moshe to actually capture this territory in the north, which was promised to them anyway. Right. Okay. Let's deal with that, because I think that's an interesting idea here. The commentators also point out that the division of the land somewhat changed because of the events in the first of yesterday's parsha with Reuven, Menashe, and Chatzi and Gad inhabiting the land on the eastern part of the Yarden. Therefore, there was more land available for the other tribes.
Right.
Which
Okay.
is why Dan gets this portion right on the west.
Okay. So there's a couple of things there that are interesting. Let's just, if we just read that verse 47 in Joshua that David's just mentioned. I'll read it to you in Hebrew and then in English. In Hebrew, it says, "Vayetzei gvul b'nei Dan mehem, vayalu b'nei Dan vayilachamu im leshem vayilkedu ota, vayaku ota lefi charem vayirshu ota vayeshu va." The border of the children of Dan was beyond them, as they failed to conquer all of their inheritance. I'm giving you the Steinsaltz commentary as well. Here, the verse mentions an incident that occurred much later, which is what we're learning about now. And the children of Dan went up and made war against Leshem, also called Laish, located near the northern edge of Israel, up here. There we go, where my pointer is there. And originally inhabited by Sidonians. That's one of the nearest big cities there, Sidon. They captured it and smote it by the sword, and they took possession of it and dwelled in it. Since large areas inland were inhabited by other tribes, while the Philistines lived on the coast, the tribe of Dan traveled far in search of another portion until it found a quiet place that they were powerful enough to conquer and settle. They called Leshem by the name of Dan, there, after their ancestor Dan. From that point onwards, the city was called Dan and served as the northern landmark of the land of Israel. Now, I have a bit of a difficulty with this that David's just said. And my difficulty is this. Moshe Rabbeinu is, if you like, according to the explanation that we've just been given, when he calls the tribe of Dan in his bracha to Dan, when he calls in a tribe that's near the Bashan, you can see here where my pointer is here, Bashan is here. This is the land of the Bashan. And what David's saying is that this was a prophecy that Dan would end up here. Fine. So if that's a prophecy that he's going to end up there, and if there is already an almost an understanding that Dan is not going to take this area, why would Yehoshua, in his division of the land, give Dan a portion which he already knows, or it's already been predicted or prophesied by Moshe Rabbeinu, they're going to fail on? I find that a little bit difficult to understand, because, you know, this is one of the difficulties that we have, isn't it? This perennial question. If Hashem knows what's going to happen in the future, do we have any free choice? If God knows that tomorrow I'm going to do a certain sin, then I don't have any free choice about it. If Moshe Rabbeinu predicts and prophesies that Dan is going to fail to conquer his land that he's given, and he's going to go up here and live up here in the north, then do we have any criticism of Dan for not doing that? And why give him that portion in the first place? If it's not conquerable, why give him a task he can't do? I find that a little bit difficult. I'm interested to know if anybody's got any comments on that before we move on.
Wasn't it done by lottery?
It was done by lottery, but it was a lottery al pi Hashem, Nachum. It wasn't a lottery as we understand it.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Elaine.
Okay. Just to say, your point about the sin you're going to commit tomorrow, chas v'shalom, you've got the free choice. You know the sin, you can either do it or not. So you still have the free choice. You have the potential not to do it, and you have the potential to do it. It's up to you. And I think that's the same here. They have the potential to take over, or they have the potential not to, and they failed taking over there, so they took the easy route out.
So, okay, that's interesting. So if we say that, so then David marks what Elaine would say, and I would agree with that, is that we spoke about this a bit last week, and I think that what Elaine has said is a bit of a support from what I said last week, which is that Moshe Rabbeinu's prediction or prophecy that there was going to be here in Dan was, if you like, a b'di'evet. Moshe Rabbeinu also says at the end of his life in Parshat Hazinu and V'zot HaBracha, right at the end of the Torah, he also says, I know you lot are a stiff-necked people. you're going to fail. You're going to leave Hashem's path, and you've already started. And as soon as I die, I know what's going to happen. You're going to go off the rails. So it could well be that what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying when he describes Dan as a people of Bashan is a b'diavad situation. And therefore, and what Elaine is saying is that they had an opportunity to do this. Maybe they tried their best and failed, or maybe they didn't try hard enough. For whatever reason, they failed to do that, and then they went off searching for somewhere else. So it could well be that the two things are not mutually exclusive, but they are that Moshe Rabbeinu is giving us the facts of what is going to happen, not the ideal of what happens. I can see lots of hands up. Let me take some in order. Hillary, I've seen for a while. Let's go Hillary, Johnny, and Paul in that order. Hillary. We can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself. You can't. Okay, well, we'll come back to you, see if you can. Johnny.
Yeah, on page 66 of the Steinsaltz in Joshua, there is a map showing Ashdod part of Yehuda. I don't know if you mentioned that just now.
No, I didn't. Let's have a look. 66.
On the chapter above, the line above it says, this is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Judah. And here are the list of I'll give you a whole list. And in Pasuk 47, it mentions Ashdod on the next page.
Have a look at that, everyone. That is the tribe of the biblical land of Judah. So that includes it. Now, if we go back to our map here, you can see there, Paul, that Judah obviously abuts onto Philistia. Your question was a very good question, but I think the question actually is on the makers of this map more than anything else.
Yeah.
But a very interesting point that according to that, Judah will have gone all the way over here, including Philistia. But clearly, it wasn't conquered, certainly not at this time, and probably not until David HaMelech's time was it fully conquered. Okay.
In Pasuk 47, Johnny says, Ashdod, its towns and its surrounding areas, Gaza and its towns and their surrounding areas. It includes Gaza as well.
All of those belong to Judah.
Pasuk 47.
So there you are. Those belong to Judah. So we've answered Paul's question very well. Thank you, Johnny. Yes, Paul.
No, it's the same thing. I was looking at the same. I've also got a map in my Tanakh on Joshua, and it also mentions what was the lot for Dan, and doesn't include those. But the answer it should be Yehuda, not Dan.
Yes, I think we just have to put the question on the makers of this map. But that was a very interesting point. Yes, Hillary, you managed to unmute.
Yeah, sorry. Did you not say last week that they were a seafaring people?
Who?
Because I thought they were shepherds originally, the Danites. You said, well, they were a seafaring people. That's why they were given the.
I think it's that they were described as a seafaring people.
So
sorry, they were not described as a seafaring people. That was Zevulun was the seafaring people.
Oh, I thought you. So how were they described?
Dan were the rear guard. Dan were the rear guard. They brought up the rear. They protected the weak.
Right. You said also last week that it was the borders were the borders, and maybe it wasn't you that said it, but the borders were the borders, and whatever else they could conquer.
Well, we went into the land over here, Gilgal. And then we spread out. Do you remember when we did Sefer Yoshua? First thing we did was we conquered the south a bit. We had the idea, it gave us the idea that we'd conquered the whole lot in 5 minutes. Well, clearly now we can see we didn't. Right. And then we went up to the north. The fact is that we never conquered the whole lot ever, and that we never conquered most of it until the time of King David. So
but it says that when it says about the borders from Egypt to the Euphrates and this, that, and the other, it also says that we can take whatever else we can conquer, doesn't it? It doesn't limit us. It didn't limit us. And as Marcel said last week, they moved up to Dan probably because it was a better area to grow grapes.
Yeah, I mean, that may well be why Well, the Tanakh tells us the reason they chose it was because they were easy pickings. This Laish was an easy conquer.
And we're near there today, are we? We're not in that area today.
Yes,
Or
this
are
is.
we?
Yeah,
Are we deep up north?
We're not as north as Tyre. No, we're not.
That's
as not.
what I mean.
Yeah, we're our border is probably around about here, isn't it?
Zor.
Yeah. Now,
Right.
somebody mentioned Hamat. David, I think it was you mentioned Hamat earlier on. Now, what's interesting, those of you who heard the 10 tribes, 10 lost tribes shir, Hamat was one of the places which is mentioned in Divrei Hayomim Chronicles as where the northern tribes were exiled to after the conquering by the Assyrians. How many years later? Probably about 700 years after the time we're talking now. Okay, let's move on in Tanakh because.
Johnny, can I just ask you, Johnny, one question? How were the tribes given their land? Was it pro rata by the population, or how many were in the tribes?
It's spoken about pro rata in the population, but actually it's not that clear because Gad was one of the smallest tribes, and Ephraim was one of the biggest tribes. Although it is spoken about, each man should have his own area. It may be that it was useful land per person as opposed to overall land, because quite a lot of this land wouldn't have been useful because it would have been mountainous.
Johnny?
Michael Krauss.
Right, Johnny, when they came into the land of Israel, Gad and Reuben in particular had to lend troops so they could conquer the land of Israel. Why didn't the other tribes help Dan or Yehuda in conquering the other area? Why did they sort of effectively desert them? Okay,
because we're talking about two different periods of time. You're quite right. Yesterday's Sedra has one of my favorite psukim in which Reuven and Gad go to Moshe Rabbeinu and say, we'd like to stay on the the east bank of the river. We want to be over here. We don't want to go into Eretz Yisrael proper. And Moshe Rabbeinu says to them, what? Your brothers will go out to war and you will stay here? This is and he says, no, not on your Nelly, no chance. You have to be part of the people. And he tells them off for suggesting that they would stay and not go into Israel. They say, no, that's not what we meant. What we meant is we'll go over. In fact, not only will we go over as part of the army, we'll be the vanguard. We will go first. We will be the pioneers. We'll be the chalutzim. We will go and we will conquer the land with you. And then when it's all done, then we'll go back to our people. And Moshe says, okay, that's fine. So that's what happens. Now remember, the Joshua, inverted commas, conquers the land over a period of a number of years, of 7 years altogether. At the end of that period, they then go back to their land, but the whole land isn't conquered. Only the initial conquest did they take part in. So once that initial conquest had taken part, and at the end of Joshua's life, I think somebody just quoted it, I think it might have been Hillary, just quoted it a short time ago. At the end of Joshua's life, he says, there are lands that are not conquered yet. Go off, each tribe, go and conquer your own land. We've seen, Michael, all the way through Sefer Shoftim, all the way through all the different judges, that all of these skirmishes were very, very much tribal. If you remember Gidon, he was from Manasseh, and we had even Dvorah was critical that only some of the tribes came to help and not everybody. So this was a different period of time. The initial conquest, which was supposedly done by the whole of Bnei Yisrael, is over, and it was now a time when each individual tribe was meant to go off and do their own thing. So that's why we have that situation where Reuven and Gad were and half of Manasseh were willing to be the vanguard, but then later on, each tribe was on its own, as it were. Sharon, are you wanting to say something before we move on?
I need to ask a question. How can it be that there were any tribes that were seafaring tribes when they'd all been slaves in Egypt, and that they'd only had tribes, tribal rights after the Egyptian experience? How could they be seafaring, or is this a prophecy that they will become the seafarers of the people of Israel?
Exactly. This is Moshe Rabbeinu giving his predictions, his prophecies of what will be, that these tribes will be seafaring, these tribes will be merchants, these tribes will be warriors. Yeah, it's exactly that. It's a prophecy. You're quite right. They weren't yet anything. They were just shepherds and wandering around. Let's get into the Tanakh now.
Can I just say one other thing? It also says that you can't do Truma and Misa until the land is conquered. And the fact that you're expanding your borders, the land has Kedusha, and you are actually bringing Kedusha to the land by expanding. So they were told that if they went past their borders,
I don't think that's right, Hilary. I think that they were allowed to expand their borders under Milchemet Rishon. They were given permission, but that doesn't make those expanded borders into the Holy Land of Israel. There's two different things here. There's the holiness of the biblical land of Israel, which are the borders which are spoken about in the Torah. And then those are the wars that the kings, particularly King David, waged outside of the borders of Israel to expand the borders. But those borders, if they'd have conquered, for example, if they'd have gone south and conquered the whole of Egypt, that wouldn't have made Egypt the land of Israel. That might have been part of greater Israel's empire, but it wouldn't have made it the Holy Land of Israel. The Holy Land of Israel are the borders that were told to us by God in the Torah. Right, let's get on to verse 11, which is where we left it. The spies of Dan had gone up to this area here, found this place called Laish, which was a quiet, non-aggressive, no-packed town, easy pickings, and they'd gone back to Dan and said, come on, we can do this, let's go up there, it's dead easy, and what are you waiting for? So verse 9 said, rise and we'll go up against them, for we've seen the land, behold, it's very good, and don't delay, do not be dilatory in going, come on, let's go and take possession of the land. And so that's what they do. Verse 11, Nachum, would you like to read to us verse 11 in chapter 18, please?
And there journeyed from there of the Danite family out of Zorah and Eshtaol 600 men girded with weapons. And they went up and encamped near Kiryat Jearim in Yehuda. Therefore they called the place the camp of Dan. Until this day, behold, it is behind Kiryat Jearim.
Okay, let's stop there for a sec. Okay, so Dan is over here, and we're told now that they've started their journey. Where they're off to is up here, but it's important that we know where they're gone. So they've gone to this place called Kiryat Yearim. Does anybody know where Kiryat Yearim is today? The town of Kiryat Yearim has another name, a more well-known name, but its real name is Kiryat Yearim.
I think Kiryat Yearim is on the way to Yerushalayim.
It is indeed. Do you know what most people call Kiryat Yearim today?
Tellstone.
Tellstone, correct. It is known as Tellstone. So, Kiryat Yearim, oh no, that's not what I want to show you. There it is. Kiryat Yearim, can you see the Google map I've put up here? You can just about make out there in Hebrew, Tellstone. This is Kiryat Yearim. The real name of Tellstone is Kiryat Yearim. It's right next to Abu Ghosh. you pass it on the way up to Jerusalem. Over here, there's Abu Ghosh. You can just see my there. And there's Tel Stone, but its real name is Kiryat Ye'arim. And as you can see, there's Jerusalem. It is northwest of Jerusalem. Now, if we go back to our map here, there's Jerusalem. Northwest of Jerusalem, Kiryat Ye'arim is over here, right on the border of Dan, Binyamin, and Yehuda. It was an important place. Kiryat Ye'arim was an important place because it was a border town. If you have a look on Wikipedia over here, you probably can't read it because it's small, but have a look at it later on. It's a key landmark in identifying the border between the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, as mentioned in Joshua 15:19, Joshua 18:14, and 15. So it's right over here, the corner of Judah and Benjamin, and also the corner of Dan. So it's an important place, this Kiryat Ye'arim. So why are we told that they went there? Because this was a resting place for them, and they camped there, and they called it Machane Dan, the camp of Dan. Okay, so they've gone with them, and they've got 600 soldiers, all fully armed, and they've gone to this Dan. And then it tells us, verse 13, please, Nachum.
And they passed from there to the mountains of Ephraim and came up to Micha's house.
Okay, just stop there for a sec. So then they started to go north. We know that Micha's house was very close to Shiloh. It was in Har Ephraim, the mountains of Ephraim. We know it was close to Shiloh because the Gemara tells us that the smoke from the sacrifices in the temple of Micha mixed with the smoke from the Mishkan, which was in Shiloh. So it was close to Shiloh. So they've gone from here, from the corner of Dan, Benjamin, and Judah, they've gone up to Micha's house. That's where they're holding now. Carry on, Nachum.
And the 5 men that went to spy out the area of Litash spoke up and said to their brothers, "Do you know that in these houses there is an ephod, a teraphim, a graven image, and a molten one? And now know what you have to do."
Stop there.
And they turned there.
Stop there for us. So the 5 men, they know what's there because remember they stopped off at this stopping off house of Micha, this Chabad house of Micha, and what they've seen in there is all this silver, all these idols, and they've said to their guys now, "Hey, you know what? In this place here, there's all this money, all this gold, all this silver, all this wonderful booty, and like all good criminals, they don't actually speak out and say exactly what it is that they want them to do. They say, you know what you've got to do. Wink, wink, nod, nod, tap your nose. Off you go and nick it." And that's what they do. Verse 15.
And they turned there and came to the house of the young man, the Levite, in Micha's house, and greeted him. Now the 600 men of the children of Dan, girded with their weapons, stood by the entrance of the gate. And the 5 men that went to spy out the land went up. They came in there and took the graven image, the ephod and the teraphim and the molten image. And the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with 600 men that were girded with weapons. And they came into Micha's house.
Stop there, Nahum. So these men have just basically abused the hospitality that was shown to them previously. They've gone in, they've stayed at this place, they've enjoyed the hospitality of Micha, and they've gone in now and they have just completely emptied it of all its possessions, taken all the silver, taken the graven images, taken the ephod. Now, you could say, oh, well, what they're doing here is they're clearing out all the Avodah Zorah. They are good men, and they're just clearing out the Avodah Zorah. And you might have thought that. Hillary might even have thought so good of these men that they were clearing out the Avodah Zorah for Hashem, getting rid of it all. But actually, you'll see that's not what they were doing at all. They were just plain and simple thieves. They had gone in, and well, they weren't even thieves actually. They were robbers. Thieves go stealthily. Robbers go brazenly. These were just robbers. Daylight robbery. They've gone in there. They've abused the hospitality that was shown to them, and they have taken these things. And the priest, who is stood by the gate, were told very clearly there's absolutely nothing he could do about it, because there are 600 armed men around him. So he just has to stand there and watch this happen. And these people of Dan, well, what does that tell you about what's going on at this time? It tells you what we knew from the very first pasuk, that there was no king in England. There was no king in Israel, and every man did what they want. It was a free-for-all. There was anarchy, and there was no recourse to the law. So these men have just gone in and stolen Micha's idols and taken them for themselves. Verse 18.
And they came into, we already did that one. And the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" And they said to him, "Be still, put your hand over your mouth and go with us and be to us an instructor and a priest. Is it better for you to be a priest to the house of one man, or to be a priest to a tribe and a family in Israel?"
Okay, let's stop there. Let's stop there. So this priest, as we said before, this Levi, he seems to have no particular loyalty to anybody. Here's another person demonstrating poor midot, poor character traits. Remember, Micha took him in. We learned earlier on that Micha, although he was the priest, Micha became his sponsor. He paid him, he gave him a job, he gave him food, he gave him accommodation, and he was his priest, and he was doing all the whatever you do for Avodah Zorah. Along comes these guys and make a better offer. And they say, what do you want to be a schmatty little priest here for in this poxy little place? Come with us. We're a whole tribe. You can be our priest. You don't need to be a priest at some schmatty little place here. We'll make you into a big knacker of a priest. And the guy doesn't think twice. No loyalty whatsoever to Micha, no loyalty to the idols, no loyalty to Hashem, no hakarat tov, no gratitude for what Micha has done for him. Straight away, he's off and he goes with them. So let's carry on and see what happens.
And the priest was pleased, and he took the ephod and the teraphim and the graven image, and he came in the midst of the people. And they turned and departed, and put the little ones, the cattle and the goods before them.
Okay, stop there, Nafum. We've now got a new piece of information. First of all, we see the priest is gone with them, and then they've turned up and they're going north now. So the moment they're here near Shiloh, they're now going north. They're heading up to here. Now, the extra piece of information that we've now got is in verse 21, when it says they placed the children and the livestock and the property before them. Up till now, we've only heard about the 5 spies and the 600 men. We now hear that actually this was lock, stock and barrel. They hadn't just sent up 600 soldiers from Dan to go and conquer this land. They were so confident in their ability to go and conquer this land that they took with them everything, their children and their livestock and their property. This was lock, stock and barrel. The whole of Dan has decamped from here and he's on his way up here. Now that shows you the confidence of these people, because if you think about the way it was always done in the past, you would send out a vanguard of soldiers who would conquer the place, because you wouldn't want to take your children and your wives and your animals and your property, because A, that would slow you down in the battle, and B, it would put them in danger. So you would go conquer the place, and then you would go and get them or send for them. Same thing happened at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century in Europe. I'm sure practically every single one of you had a grandparent or a parent or a great-grandparent who came from Eastern Europe west, either to the UK or to the US, and they came on their own. And then later on, they sent for their wives and their children once they'd established themselves in the place. That was the way it was done. Here, what we're told in this pasuk is that Dan didn't do it that way. They decamped completely on their way up north. And I think that this tells us the confidence that they had in their spies. And it's a very interesting contrast that they had such confidence in their spies who had gone up there and said, Laish is easy pickings. We can do it dead easy. Contrast that with the Bnei Yisrael's response to the spies of Moshe, who came and said, ooh, this ain't going to be so easy. It's a great land, but this ain't going to be so easy. These people are very, very strong. Not only did they not want to take their whole people with them, they didn't want to go at all. They said, oh my goodness, Ochen Vei, let's go back to Egypt. A complete contrast between the two episodes of the spies. Here in Dan, they're very confident of their ability. Yes, Helen?
What did the tribe of Naphtali have to say about the fact that the tribe of Dan were going to decamp onto their land, on the land that had been promised to them and set up there?
Okay, I thought the same question actually last week. And I think the answer must lie in the description that the Tanakh gives us of this place, Laish. If I just go back to earlier on in the chapter 18, or is it at the end of chapter 17, where the spies actually go up. Yes, the beginning of chapter 18. Verse 2, the children of Dan sent 5 men from their family, the leaders, go investigate. They came to the highlands of Ephraim, to the house of Micha, that's that. And then where did they go? They went up, verse 7. The 5 men went a long way and they came to Laish, today called Tel Dan, in the northern Hula Valley. And they saw the people in it, in the city, living in security in the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure. So I think from that description, we can see that Naphtali had not conquered that area either. Certainly not this bit, because they were living in the manner of the Sidonians. They were connected to Sidon. Naphtali had not conquered Laish. Yeah. So Laish was, as it were, up for grabs. There's still a question though, Helen. It's still a question, because the question really is, if it was so easy to conquer, why didn't Naphtali do it? Presumably, Naphtali didn't need it. Naphtali's got a lot of land here. The further north you go, I think probably the more difficult the terrain is. Maybe Naphtali was satisfied with the more southern part of its territory and wasn't all that bothered. It certainly wasn't bothered enough to go and pick off Laish, which was very easy. So the question would be, what would Naphtali say to Dan on its way up when it sees all these big troop of Danites with all their kids and their people coming in there? It would have said to him, oi, where do you think you're going? And they'd have said, well, we're going up to Laish. And Naphtali could have said, what are you talking about? That's in my territory, get lost. Or they might have been brotherly and said, okay, we don't really need it, we've got enough here. Gesundheit to hate, you can have it. I don't know, maybe that was the conversation, but the question definitely arises.
Okay.
Right, a brief question. It says it's on a slightly different thing. It says here they put the kids, the cattle and everything else in front of them. That seems a little bit odd, that the army should be at the back and they should be at the front, okay, according to my translation.
Yeah, no, you're right. And the Mefarshim also point that out, and they say that it must be, and I suppose that makes sense, as they were going north, what they were worried about was attacks from the south, rather than attacks from
Johnny,
the north.
nobody will attack frontally in a battle. That's why it was the best to put the chattels and the children and everything at the front, because nobody will attack from the front. They'll attack either from the side or from the back, from the flank or from the rear.
All right. Well, that answers it from a tactical point of view, but certainly,
Johnny,
I think what it means is that they were concerned about attack from the south, because as you point out,
when
Michael,
Amalek attacked Israel, they attacked from the rear, not from the front.
Correct.
Johnny,
Correct. One second, Hillary. One second. Correct, Philip. We read in Parshat Zachor. Remember what Amalek did? They attacked the weak from behind.
Yeah.
So here they put the weak at the front for that very same reason. So I think that answers that question. Yes, Hillary.
And maybe I'm a bit thick, but they're going through land that is all B'nai Yisrael.
I was going to
They're all the different tribes of B'nai Yisrael. So why would they expect to be attacked if they're going through their own people?
Okay, I don't think that's being thick. I think that's perhaps being naive. They were not.
Whatever.
The tribes were not. We know already that the tribes were not supporting one another.
Yeah, of course not. Tribalism.
So, we were not. This is a problem. We were not a united B'nai Yisrael. The next time that we were a united B'nai Yisrael was in the time of King Saul and the time of King David. At this point, we were just a bunch of tribes. All the battles we've described in Sefer Shoftim so far have been tribal battles, not battles of the whole B'nai Yisrael. So, that was what Helen's question was. What would Naphtali have to say when Dan come marching through their territory? And I suspect that they wouldn't have been too pleased, but when they were told they were going right up to the north, they may well have said, oh, okay. Or, less likely, it may be that Dan looked a bit too strong for them and didn't fancy a fight. But that is why Helen asked that question, because the tribes were not completely united and not helping one another. Howard?
Just going back to the robbery, examples of robbery, they're unconstrained in their behaviour. You almost got to it when you were at Pasuk 7. There was no magistrate in the land that might put them to any shame in anything. Beginning of the chapter, in those days there was no king in Israel. I see even the next chapter begins with the same words.
Yes,
when there was no king in Israel. So they're unconstrained.
100%. That's why that pasuk is there all the time. No king in Israel, no authority, completely unconstrained. As you'll see in the next chapter, they get even worse. Their behavior is even worse than this. And again, that behavior is can only happen when you have a lawless society. And that is what Tanakh is telling us, that this was a lawless society. Okay.
Perhaps they thought that Micha would get an army together to try and repossess his goods that have been stolen. That's why they'd be attacking from the south.
That's a good point, except that you'll see, it is a good point, but you'll see in a moment that Micha does try and get his stuff back, and they just basically laugh in his face, which we'll come to in a couple of Sukkim's time. Yes, Johnny?
On page 80 of the Steinfeld, sorry. Page 80, Pasuk 34, it tells you the border of Naphtali reaches Judah, and it shows you on the map there, which is where Dan is on your map.
Yeah.
So that was part of Naphtali's land.
Yes, yes, indeed, it was part of Naphtali's land. You can see it from this map here. It's only called Dan there because afterwards it was changed its name to Dan. Originally it was called Laish, or Leshem was another name for it. Morris?
Well, One moment. All of this seems to fortify my belief that I held for a long time, that the tribe of Dan was actually located in the north, because if they picked themselves up lock, stock, and barrel and moved up there, that's where that became the new tribal lands. The question is, of this area here, how much of it was actually became their land, or was it just in around this area of Lachish and what's called Tel Dan today?
Yeah, I think
would have been even a
probably
smaller area than they had in the beginning.
I think probably the Dan here would have been its capital, and therefore its hinterland would have been around the north part of Naphtali. And my feeling is, because of the question that Helen asked, my feeling is that they settled in the north of Dan, the north of Naphtali, and the northern part of Naphtali became the territory of Dan.
That's how I grew up believing.
And probably by mutual consent of Naphtali. Right, let's just carry on a little bit more. Where are we up to? Verse
22.
Verse 22.
They were at a distance from the house of Micha when the men that were in the houses, which were near Micha's house, were gathered. And they overtook the children of Dan. And they called the children of Dan, and they turned their faces. And they said to Micha, "What's with you that you are gathered?" And he said,
just stop there a sec, Nachum. So imagine this scenario. You've just gone into this place. You've absolutely emptied it. You've stolen everything that's going on. And then the people who you've stolen from come chasing after you with all their people. And you turn to them and you say, "What's your problem, mate?" Well, it's pretty obvious what your problem is. You've just stolen everything that they own. But this is the brazenness of the people of Dan, that they've gone in, they've stolen everything, they've emptied their most prized possessions, and they have the chutzpah to turn round when these guys come after them to say, "What's your problem, pal? Why are you coming and causing trouble?" It's transference, really. It says, "What's your problem? Why have you mobilized?" Well, they're the ones that mobilized. They're the ones that were armed and went in there and stole. Verse 24.
And he said, "My God, which I made you, took away. In addition to the priests, you have gone away. What else have I? How then can you say to me, what is with you?" And the children of Dan said to him,
hang on there. Micha says, "What do you mean, what's wrong with me? It's pretty obvious, isn't it? You've stolen my gods. You've stolen all my money. What kind of a question is that? It's pretty obvious." And then look what Dan says back. Look what these bandits say. Verse 25.
And the children of Dan said to him, "Let not your voice be heard among us, lest men of embittered souls assail you, and you will lose your life and the lives of your household." And the children of...
Let me just stop you there, Nachum. I want to read you the Steinsaltz, because it's a great translation and notes. Listen to this. Verse 25. The children of Dan said to him, "Do not sound your voice among us. It's in your best interest to lower your voice, lest embittered men harm you. We are fair people, but there are also some hot-headed thugs amongst us. And if you cause an uproar, you'll lose your life and the lives of your household, as they will kill you." So what Dan is saying is, look, we're very fair people, so fair that we've just stolen everything that you've got and everything, but we're good guys. But you know what? We've got a few thugs, we've got a few mafia amongst us here, amongst our lot. So you know what? Let me give you a piece of advice. Keep your mouth shut, because if not, you don't know, these mafia might just want to sort you out. I mean, the chutzpah of these people of Dan to say to these people, okay, they were idol worshippers, but they were honest idol worshippers. They make idols out of somebody else's money. These people have gone in, stolen everything, and then bully them when they come back to try and recoup what has been stolen from them. And look at what happens in verse 26. Might is right. Verse 26.
And the children of Dan went their way, and Micha saw that they were stronger than he, and he turned and went back to his house. And they took that which Micha had made, and the priest whom he had, and they came to Laish, to a people tranquil and secure, and they struck them with the edge of the sword, and the city they burnt with fire.
Okay,
stop there.
Stop there. Okay, so the children of Dan went on their way, and Micha saw that they were stronger than he. There was nothing he could do. And so what did he do? He turned around, and Steinsaltz adds one word here, which really tells us what's going on. He says, they turned around and despondently returned to his house. Since there was no organized government, he had no recourse to issue a complaint. The guy had nothing to do. If somebody came into your house and stole all your stuff, and then you ran after him and he said, get lost, I'm taking it, I'm stronger than you, you could go to the police, you could go to the authorities, you could take him to court. These people had no recourse to anything. And this is a description of an anarchic society. And this is how the Bnei Israel were living. This is what Tanakh is telling us this story for. It's telling us this story to show just how far we had strayed from the path that we were meant to be on, the path that Moshe Rabbeinu set us on, the path that Yehoshua had set us on. And we had strayed so far that we have idol worship, we have the Ten Commandments being broken, we have bullying, we have no recourse to law, there are no courts, there are no police.
It's like today, Johnny, it's like today.
So this is why Tanakh is telling us this story. And I think that we should stop and we should consider just how low we had got in this particular period of time. And it was on this background, and the background of the next story, which we'll get to in a couple of weeks, which is even worse. It's on that background that we see the next book, which we'll go into, which is the rise of Shmuel, who was the savior of the people because they had hit absolute rock bottom. Yes, Stanley.
I just want to, what happens with Mishkan and Sanhedrin?
Okay. So
with all elders and that, Mishkan still in Shiloh.
The Mishkan is still in Shiloh. Nobody's taking any notice of it. It's there. There's no Sanhedrin. It's just the korbanot are going on. You'd have a few from people there, if you like, doing what they'll be doing, but the rest of the population are completely irrelevant. It's irrelevant to them. They're not taking any notice. Sadly, it's like the people that we see, Nebuch, that come to shul for their bar mitzvah, who don't know what the inside of a shul even looks like, and that's what's going on here. Yes, Anita.
Am I unmuted? Yeah. Do we know who took over the land that Dan vacated when they left to go up to up north? Who took over their territory?
Probably at that time the Pelishtim.
Nobody sees you.
Because the
Philip, can you mute yourself?
The Pelishtim were already in Ekron. Ekron was one of their towns already. So they'd already encroached into Dan, and I suspect that they probably ruled Dan anyway when Dan was there. So I suspect that initially they took over that area, and then later on, at the time of David HaMelech, when they were finally defeated, David HaMelech, of course, was from the tribe of Judah, and his capital was Hebron initially, and later on Jerusalem. And he would have then have subdued the Pelishtim and taken it over. But initially, almost certainly would have been taken over by the Pelishtim.
Okay. Excuse me. Can I say?
1 second. Johnny first and then Nechama.
How comes the chief rabbi of Perth gets his name?
Yeah, well, we don't want to call him Laish, do we?
Dan.
Yes, Nechama.
I see here, first I think I wanted to ask, Shimshon is from the tribe of Dan?
Yes.
Yeah, so it was very close to him, to the Philistines.
Yeah, what we need to remember, Nechama, is that these episodes, although they are written in the Tanakh after the chapter of Shimshon, they took place much before Shimshon. They took place fairly soon after the death of Joshua, at the beginning of the period of Judges. The Shmuel, who wrote Sefer Shoftim, placed these stories at the end because it fits more to the picture of the deterioration of the people. Because Shimshon was a deteriorated period where the people were not behaving, and this was a sort of par excellence, if you like, they weren't behaving. But chronologically, this took place well before the time of Shimshon. Okay, any more comments before?
Yeah, I had one more comment.
Yes.
I wanted to mention that this story, the whole story here of stealing and stealing the idols and the Kohen and this and that, just shows how ridiculous the idol worshipping is. And that really, you know, what does it mean to steal a God? You cannot steal Hashem, but you can steal the God and do ridiculous things, you know.
Well, this is the famous midrash of Abraham Avinu, when everybody will know the famous midrash that he was left in charge of his father's idol shop one day while his father went off somewhere else, and while he was away, he smashed up all the idols and put the hammer in the hand of the biggest idol. And his father came back and said, "Hey, Avram, what have you done? You've smashed up all the stock. You've ruined my business." And Avram said, "It wasn't me. It was this idol. Look, he's got hold of the hammer." And Avram's father, Terach, said, "Don't be stupid. He's made out of stone. He can't do anything." And Avram said, "Well, if he can't even do that, then how can we be a god?" That's a famous midrash, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And this is the same idea, Nechama. You're quite right. When you stop and think about it, it's ridiculous. But that's what that was the thought processes of the people in those days. That's how they were seen. These things were seen as not necessarily as gods themselves, but as appeasements for the gods. They were, if you like, a conduit through which to reach their gods. And therefore they were very precious about them. Yes, Howard?
Well, I just wanted to say that I hope this idea of putting the women and children at the front of the caravan is not the first or an early example of human shields.
I don't think it was, because I think you'll find that in Jewish history, at least, the children and the wives are protected, and we know that from Chumash. Where do we know it from in Chumash? Who's going to tell me that?
Yaakov.
Yaakov, correct. When Yaakov goes to meet Esau, he puts all the wives and children behind him. He goes and confronts Esau, and he puts them behind because that was the safest place. And that's why I say that they were worried, and Philip agrees, so it must be right, that they were worried about attacks from the south because they put their children at the front. I think the absolute opposite. I know you were saying that tongue-in-cheek, Howard, but it's absolutely the opposite. The fact that they put them in the front means that they were worried about attacks from the south.
What Hamas are doing now, Johnny? Hamas do that.
Just other people.
Say that again, Howard?
Partly tongue-in-cheek, but we know that we're dealing with degenerate people.
Yes, perhaps true, yes.
Hamas are doing that now in Gaza, putting the wives and the women and
yes, that's what Howard was alluding to, making them.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely right. And we...
Yes, but war is different today. War is different today. They didn't have firearms in those days. If they attacked from the front, they'd get outflanked, Their flank would be on the sea and they would be massacred. They could only attack from the flank or from the rear, not from the front.
Okay, thank you for that, General Philip. Right, we'll call it a day, and we'll carry on next week. Let me just stop the recording. There we go.